Okay, folks, so let's take this a bit at a time and bear with me. I'm going to talk about the unemployment levels today. It's been announced that unemployment's eased up just a further notch from 3.6% unemployment to 3.7% unemployment. Now, that's still unusual. It's still an unprecedented low rate of unemployment in terms of our economy. So why is that, and what's causing this low rate of unemployment? Well, there's still a record amount of jobs out there available for people, and there's still fewer people actually chasing these positions. The natural cycle of people finishing a job and starting a job, plus the fact that people are actually taking earlier retirement and leaving the workforce earlier than normal, that's caused this issue. It happens right now in terms of the unemployment numbers. Now, the government's working on ways in order to encourage people to come back into that, into the employment field, and they're looking at examples of other countries and how they do that. One of the other things about unemployment, I mean, it's edged up so slightly. The vacancies also fell by 76,000 in November to January, making it the seventh consecutive quarterly fall. The Office of National Statistics said it reflects uncertainty, economic pressures, and holding back recruitment. Yes, people do hold back recruitment. However, what you'll find is in order to attract the right person to your job at your advertising, you're probably going to have to pay a bit more than the usual market rate just now, which will put pressure on wage inflation, which again will put pressure on inflation. And let me explain how that happens. The best thing that they say they can do, the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt says, unemployment's remaining near record lows is encouraging, but cooling rapidly due to rising consumer prices, which was key. And he says the best thing they can do is to make people's wages go further is to stick to our plan to have inflation this year. Now, bear with me. I know there's a lot of pressure right now in terms of the fear on interest rate rises might actually happen again. And just bear with me. Now, remember, let's move it back to unemployment levels. Talk about the number of days strike action it's on just now, the amount of union pressure as well to get better wage deals as well, and how that all affects the housing market overall, but also the economy itself. Now, very simplistic view here, so make it really easy for people. A record 2.5 million working days were actually lost to strikes last year in Britain as it suffered its worst industrial action since the Margaret Thatcher was actually in power. A total of 843 working days, 843,000 working days were lost in December, taking the total from June to December to 2.5 million almost, the highest since 1989 when the country was in the grip of strikes by the ambulance workers and coal miners. Strikes also contributed to 2.9% fall in the number of hours worked to the 1 billion hours worked from October to December. The figures, that's from the Office of National Statistics. Wages jumped by 6.7% during the same period, the fastest rate seen outside the pandemic during the same period. The stronger than expected pay growth will pile pressure, here it comes, on the Bank of England to tame rampant inflation, which is at a near 40-year high. It will also raise concerns that most interest rate rises may be still needed, and more interest rate rises may still be needed, even as the bank earlier signalled to end the aggressive tightening circle is near its end. Now, that means now you are getting fixed rate deals out there for 5 years at 3.99% just now. That's a really good deal. Potentially, you maybe should be really considering that if you're on a variable rate or if you're coming to the end of your existing rate. That's probably a good rate to come on. Now, you need to take advice from obviously a mortgage broker because they'll be able to tell you based on what position you're in. Myself personally, I fixed one of my big loans because I have a feeling that base rates have not stopped yet, because we're getting told time and time again by the Chancellor and the Bank of England as well that we're going to go into recession, then all of a sudden it's not going to be a recession anymore, and then it's going to be a mild recession now. And I'm beginning to doubt if they're ever going to get a recession. That's where my thoughts are. So better to have security and understand where you are right now in terms of your budgets than actually leave it open to chance. And the fact that can you afford if interest rates or base rates go up again and then again and then again? And the answer to that is no, then potentially you should be looking to fix your rate right now to give you some sort of certainty, because you can't afford that for the next 5 years or the next 2 years, the next 3 years. Again, speak to your mortgage broker for that reason. Chief economist at KPMG, which is one of the big accountancy firms and financial forecasting firms, said that the fast-pacing pace of wage increases reflection in the spiral or spilling into pay demands. She said the strong figures could reflect a turning point, however. Also added regular pay growth could be around its peak already and may average 6% over 2023, which would ease the pressure on the Bank of England to raise interest rates further. Now, why is that the case? Let me just show you a wee graph here. So here's unemployment. It sits now at 3.7%. I'll just flip onto the next page on this screen and show you that one. So unemployment here's the graph. And when you look at it back in 1971, we were at 4.1% unemployment, and it's never been lower than that until now, since 1971. That means we've got a record amount of people employed in the economy, which means there's more taxes coming, which means there's more money being spent in the economy than ever before. So what is the knock-on effect? It can cause inflationary pressure. So inflation, according to here, now there's two different scenarios here. There's one with mortgages and one without mortgages. So it's actually, the Office of National Statistics say to December, it's 9.2%, when in actual fact, it's round about just over the 10% level. And that's excluding the mortgage rates, because obviously they're a lot lower. So that's why there's a different figure here. But the most important thing about inflation, let me show you the graph. Here's inflation here going way back. Let's take it right back last 10 years. We'll do it year on year. For 1989, so 6% inflation. You could see it dropped like a stone. 1992, it started to come down. It stayed level and all the way through. 2007, it started to climb up. It started to climb up again in 2011. And then it was record lows, and then boom, it's back up. Okay, now, when you think about the logic of this, why do we need to curb inflation? This is the point. And what is inflation? So let me explain to you in an easier way. Hopefully you'll get this. Inflation is the erosion of the value of the money you have in your hand to purchase the same items later on. What I mean by that is, say a pint of milk costs £1. So you get a pint of milk this year at £1. If by the end of the year, your pint of milk is now £1.5, inflation is 5%, because it's the extra you've got to pay over and above what you paid now. So the inflation for the year is 5%. That's what it is. That's why people are saying food inflation is around about 17% now, which is a lot more. Now, why would they want to curb inflation? Because if inflation's high, we can no longer be able to buy the goods that we need to survive. Let's look at it like that. Your food, your energy bills, your travel back and forward in your car to get to your work, maybe on the bus, on transport, on trains as well. And inflation, if these prices go up, you need to earn more money to do that. Now, rather than earn more money, most people just go straight to their employer and say to the employer, I need more money. And then the employer goes, okay, I'll rifle through the drawers, I'll have a look and I'll see what I can get for you. Then they come up with, yes, we can give you a pay rise as a result of that. And they give you a pay rise. But subsequently, because they've given you a pay rise, they then have to then say to themselves, actually, we need to put our prices up now because they've actually given people pay rises, and other businesses have given people pay rises and they put their prices up. So we've got to put our prices up. Now they put their prices up, which just so happens to be the pint of milk. And the pint of milk now goes from £1.5 to £1.10 because the person that's trying to buy the pint of milk needs more money to do that, but they're manufacturing it and they then need to put the price up to pay them more to buy that. So that's how that happens. And then what happens is they then come back after that pint of milk is going up again and says, look, I'm going to have to get more money because I'm going to have to buy goods at a higher price. Therefore, in order to afford it, I'm just going to have more money. They then go to the employer again. The employer gives them another salary increase. Lo and behold, they have to put up their prices again. And then therefore, the pint of milk now becomes £1.15, if not £1.20. See how inflation starts to erode there. But the most important key here, though, is because inflation's like that, the person that has to rely on universal credit in other words, benefits, does not have that luxury where they can go to someone and say, I need more money. These prices are no longer out in their reach. Therefore, they can only buy less. Therefore, it gets worse for them. Therefore, the government then has to say, because of that, we have to give you more benefit or more universal credit in order to help you. But where does that come from? It comes from taxes. It comes from us. So therefore, you've now got less money in your hand than you had before, because you're now getting more tax on your salary. So then you have to go to your employer and say, I need more money because of this. Therefore, your employer says, okay, I'm going to have to put up prices again. See how that spiral works? It gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's why inflation is the most important thing to control right now, because of that debt, because of that wealth destruction and how that happens. Now, I don't mean wealth as in the rich. I mean wealth as in what we've got in our pocket right now and what you can then buy as with that money, and then what it'll cost you in a year's time because of inflation. That's why they want to keep inflation so low. That's why it's important to do that. So the next one out of that is, how will that affect base rates then? Okay, so when it comes to this, if there's still more money in the system and there's still more goods getting bought and the prices still go up inflationary wise, the other club in the so-called bag of golf clubs, I think Norman Lamont mentioned to that, one club approach to this, and that's what they'll end up having to take. They'll have to move base rates higher in order to move mortgages higher and lending higher in order to take more money out of the system in order to curb people spending more. In other words, or potentially move base rates up in order to stop people spending more, to encourage them to save more. Although chances are that's not happening right now, because there's no really great returns out there in terms of the bank. They're quite happy to put the mortgage rates up, but they're not quite happy to put their savings rates up. But that's how the system works. How does that affect house prices? Well, if mortgage rates go up, houses become less affordable for a certain group of people because they can only buy up to a certain level, just like inflation and deflation in the way it works. So interest rates go up, therefore it costs more. Say you had, say it was £100,000 property, for example, just to make it simple, £100,000 property, and it was 5%. So therefore you'd be paying £5,000 in interest payments every single year, and just say it was an interest only to make it easy. So you pay £5,000 every single year, and you can afford that. But what happens if base rates go up by 1%? Then you're paying 6% a year. You're paying another £1,000. Now, if you're on the wire straight away, in other words, you've got everything accounted for, like your energy, your council tax, your car, your existing house payment, your repairs, your food, your any sort of luxuries you've got, like holidays and stuff like that, you've got planned and prepared for yourself in your budget. If you take an energy cost as well, and that's why if energy costs go up, you need more money from somewhere else because you've got no more money left to actually use. So something else has to give. Or you have to go back to your employer. Can I get a salary rise? And here it goes again, inflation. See how that can go, how that can, in a simplistic world, that's how it works, and that's how the system works. There's a lot of other factors involved in this. But hopefully that's giving you a real good insight into what inflation is, how it affects house prices. Because if you can only afford 5,000, this is why I talked about fixing it now, because if it does go up to you needing to afford 6,000 for your mortgage payments, you can't afford the extra £1,000 a year, which is effectively round about just under £80 a month. So you have to pay another £80 a month. And if you can't afford £80 a month, that's where you're better to get the security and the definite knowing at the fact that you can afford your current mortgage for the next 2 or 3 years, 5 years, or whatever it is, based on your personal circumstances, after discussing it with your mortgage advisor. That then takes out demand for housing at higher prices. And it's no surprise, up to about 300,000, there is more properties being bought up to 300,000 than there is actually coming on. Between 300,000 and 500,000, it's the same amount of properties coming on, same amount of properties being sold. Properties above 500,000, there's more properties coming on above that level than there is actually being bought. And that's why the ones at the top end suffer first, because people can't afford as much to buy and at higher prices in order to do that. So the top end of the market is usually the market. It kind of suffers first in terms of supply and demand, and also house prices as well. Hence the reason why you see house prices actually stabilizing, and there's potentially talk of them dropping at least 10% this year. Now, if they drop 10% this year, even if they drop 5% this year, work it out. If you're moving from your house to the next house and you're upgrading, if you wait for prices to drop 10% for upgrading, yes, there'll be a bigger drop in the 10% of the property you're upgrading to, because if that's 400,000, there's 40,000 drop. If you're on 200,000 for your house, you're a £20,000 drop. So you've gained a 20,000 differential in between. However, if you wait till that happens, potentially interest rates are probably going up in order to curb that inflationary aspect of the housing market, in order to bring these house prices down. Therefore, if base rates have gone up, your 3.99% fixed rate will no longer be available. So you could end up paying a lot more interest on a new mortgage than you were, as opposed to the drop in the house price you were going to get. Equally, if you're waiting on house prices to drop and you're going from a bigger house to a smaller house, you would think if you're going from 400 to 200, there'd be a 20,000 gain. Yes, absolutely. But you've got to, well, actually, it's not. Sorry, scrub that. You'd think there would be a gain there, but there's not, because you're losing. If you wait for it to go down 10%, you'd lose 40,000, and the price you're going down to, they'd lose 20,000. So if you've got a bigger house, you're actually probably better to sell now and not wait for a drop, if that makes sense. So hopefully, just tells you it's live. Hopefully that's come through with a bit of sense. So we've covered unemployment just now. Inflation numbers are out tomorrow. So inflation is out tomorrow. The house price index is out tomorrow as well. The Office of National Statistics. I'll be talking about that tomorrow as well. So inflation's out tomorrow. The house price index is out tomorrow. We've talked about unemployment. We've talked about base rates. There'll be a new base rate in March, because obviously in February, that's when the base rates were set again. So March will be the next base rate increase or decrease, or nothing at all. And hopefully that's given you good insight. If you want any more information, please feel free to give me a shout. You can just message me direct on this post, and I'll run through it again. Or if you've got any questions about what I've just spoken about and how it might affect you, then message me direct as well, because I might be able to give you and point in the right direction about what you would need to do for your personal circumstances. Whether it's a mortgage broker you need to speak to, whether it's an accountant you need to speak to, whether it's an estate agent like myself you need to speak to, a letting agent you need to speak to, or potentially anybody else, a financial advisor you need to speak to. Until next time, guys, I'm Jim Parker for Fife Properties TV.